Hello, and welcome to Engage with Eagle Forum, a podcast to encourage the modern day woman in her vital role in shaping society. I'm one of your hosts, Tabitha Walter, and I'm joined by our executive director, Kirsten Hasler.
Hello, everyone.
Today, we are tackling an issue that affects women, specifically young girls in sports. We couldn't think of a better person to talk about this issue than our guest today, Doreen Denny. Doreen is the Vice President of Governmental Relations at Concerned Women for America, which is the nation's largest women's public policy organization. She has held positions in the White House under George H.W. Bush, U.S. Departments of Education, Health and Human Services, and both chambers of Congress. So she's very well-rounded in the governmental sphere. She has served as a consultant for both private sector and nonprofit organizations, working on issues ranging from education reform to emerging democracies. She even took a career break to raise her two children at home who are now adults. Her and her husband reside in Arlington, Virginia. Welcome to the show, Doreen.
Thank you, Tabitha, and thank you, Kirsten. It's so wonderful to be with you today.
It is. So before we start getting into politics, let's take a second to talk about that last bit of your bio, that you chose to put your career on hold to raise your kids. So what influenced your decision to do that? And then what was it like coming back into the workforce?
Yeah. Well, thanks for asking, because I do hope this becomes an element of encouragement to women who are really considering, what does their future hold when they've been doing something that they enjoy so much in whatever role they have professionally, but then also have a tremendous value and realize that the years are short when you raise your children. And I was kind of in that situation. I was working on Capitol Hill in a very demanding position as a deputy chief of staff. The schedule kind of overruns your ability to control that. And when my husband and I started our family, he was also traveling. So for me, it was kind of an easier decision to say, hey, I'm going to be the one to step away for now. And I didn't have any big ideas about what that would look like, how long it would be, or any of that. I didn't try to make my next 10-year or 20-year plan at that moment. But as things unfolded and I had my second child and we just continued to kind of realize that our lives as it was unfolding, I did value the opportunity to be at home working and engaged in their school. They were both in public schools. I mean, that was a kind of a decision we needed to make. But I also was very involved in ministry. So I sort of turned my passion around issues and the concerns that I have for our country into ministering to women and mentoring young professional women. I didn't want a paycheck at that time because I didn't want to be obligated to, an employer. And so I just found sort of the opportunity in different ways to be fulfilled in these roles. And also, started leading the Moms in Prayer group for our schools, elementary, middle school, and high school. And so I was just realized that the Lord had those years for me for that time for a purpose. And I do have to say that I sort of laid down, I think, to the Lord a couple of years before my daughter was going to be graduating, my youngest, and said, okay, Lord, now what? Where are you going to take me? What do you want me to do with my time? You've wired me, designed me to be the person that I am. I have experiences that are still relevant, but it's a different world too. I mean, look, a couple decades later, a lot of politics had changed, the issues had changed, but a lot of the things also stayed the same. Government still runs in Washington the way that it runs, and we were still here. So I just kind of laid that out before the Lord, and this, really the opportunity to join Concerned Women for America kind of came just at the right time and for good reason. And I got called about the position, but I didn't really think about myself being there. I'm thinking they were asking me for suggestions, and then I read the role, and I thought, oh goodness, maybe I'm the one that needs to step up for this. And so I just really am grateful to Penny Nance and for this organization to open the doorways, as I know that Eagle Forum has done, to say, women, you're welcome into this world to be a contributor at whatever season the Lord has for you. And really that the opportunity to step into doing something that I really enjoy, to use some skills that I had to learn from others, has just been a real delight. So that's a long answer, but I do think it's relevant and an encouraging one that I would hope that other women who find themselves in different seasons to look at life as seasons. And that just because you might step away from a professional world for a while doesn't mean that the Lord won't have you to step back in it for a reason and for a season. And so that's where I am today in my mid 50s, and my 2 kids now that are emerging out of college, and it's been a delight.
I love that. I think it's such a barrier for a lot of women to take a step back because they're so scared about like, well, where will I be? Like, how will I get a job in, 15 to 20 years? But you did it, so other women can do it too.
Absolutely. Well, and I also find, I'll just add in that you never know when you're going to be called in to do something that you didn't expect. The issue that we're going to get into right now is one that is like that. And I feel like it's an issue that almost became more relevant and sort of new to hit the horizon around the time I was coming in. And so in that regard, again, the God's going to bring you into a place when there might be issues or particular places that we are in our culture and society that just need your skills and your talents in a new way. And we just know, we can't really predict what that's going to be at the time, but here we are now.
Right. Well, let's go ahead and dive in then.
Yeah.
So, we know women's rights have come a long way over the last 100 years. And one way that we've seen those rights play out are in sports. And, we just never thought in a million years that we would see these rights to start unravel, but here we are trying to protect women and girls from being ousted from their sports by biological men. And just to clarify, this particular problem isn't one that's focused around whether or not you agree with transgenderism, but it's actually a problem of women having an unfair disadvantage in their own sports. So can you frame some of those issues that we're seeing right now?
Sure. And I think you're exactly right, Tabitha. The understanding is that, we're recognizing that we're in a very challenging time right now with a sort of gender ideology and orthodoxy that's taking us in places we never thought we would go. And unfortunately, too many young children are being led down an unfortunate, irreversible path. And we're sorry for that on a medical front, but also just looking the fact that we're going to be present with these issues among us in our cultures and communities and schools. We have to recognize that this is among us. But what we can't deny is the truth and the reality that biological sex distinctions matter. They will always matter, regardless of what someone might do to try to alter their bodies. And we have a value and a belief around civil rights that are based on immutable characteristics. And being male and female is one of those. That is designed, ingrained in every cell in your body as a chromosomal reality, XX or XY. That doesn't change because you might have a different idea about yourself or might even pursue a course of treatment that might try to have you align more with the opposite sex. And so if we're going to have civil rights and the ability to have a fair playing field that does have impact because of your biological sex, and sports is going to be in that category, then we have to fight for the reality that biological sex distinctions matter in sports. And if we're going to have male sports or men, sports for men and boys and sports for women and girls, then it needs to be divided according to biological sex. If we want to have other categories of sports where biological sex distinctions aren't the thing that determines your participation, that's a different question, right? But when we're talking about what Title IX allowed and opened up for women and girls by allowing for educational opportunities and benefits to be on par and required equality with other, with men and boys at that time, 48 years ago. Title IX has ensured that for women, and that's been very important, and that's what we're trying to preserve.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and scientists still hold true to their assessments of the stark differences between the male body and the female body. So a study in the Journal of Applied Physiology found that men have on average 26 pounds more muscle mass than women. Women were found to have 40% less upper body strength and 33% less lower body strength. Even the fastest woman in the world, Florence Griffin Joyner, who ran the 100-meter dash in 10.49 seconds, wouldn't be qualified to run in the men's competition, which required them to run under 10:16. What are some of the specific cases that you've seen where a man has entered a women's sport competition and then won and taken opportunities away from these girls?
Yeah, so we have examples right now that have been fairly aware, I think, a growing awareness around both at the high school level and at the college level. In high school, the case that has been most prominent has been in the state of Connecticut, where you had a policy, you have a Connecticut state policy that only requires that a person identify themselves according to their gender and on a binary category, male or female. So there were some boy athletes, they are male in body, who have chosen to be girls, and therefore they got to participate as girls in track. Well, they have every characteristic. In fact, their early on participation, they hadn't done anything physically to change them, even though we know that those differences aren't completely mitigated with treatments. But because of that, of course, they were young male boys, men in a female athlete competition. And so they have been able to win the state titles. They moved on to regional competition at the expense of the girls, the female athletes, who have worked every day of their lives to be and excel in their sport, and were put on the sidelines because of it. At the college level, you have actually an NCAA national title in women's 400-meter hurdles that went to a male athlete. He was male, and I say male, again, identifying as a woman, but had previously for 3 years competed on the men's team for the same university, Franklin Pierce University, and then went on to win the national NCAA title. Of course, putting then down the podium all the other girls that really, and the female athletes, the college women that should be in the top spots. Also, Big Sky conference in the NCAA had a indoor athlete, was also doing cross country. Again, the same situation, 3 years on the men's team, transitioned and had taken some hormones, and they allowed for this individual to compete in the female competition. And again, you look at the tape, you will see that the body size and capacity of this athlete was far superior to the girls that were on the track alongside. And you know, our concern is, again, we're concerned that a system right now is allowing for this. This is the issue. Our issue is not against the athletes who are just playing by the rules as they are. Mm-hmm. We do believe that those rules have to be clarified and changed in places where unfair competition is happening. And so we filed complaints with the U.S. Department of Education on the 2 college cases. There's been a complaint at the high school level that has actually, the Department of Education has made a ruling on and determined that Connecticut's policy is in violation of Title IX, which requires that equal educational opportunities and benefits be given to women and females as they are for males. And so there's an enforcement action that's kind of pending right now. We're not exactly sure which way it's going to go, but this was the opportunity. The federal government has made a statement now that Title IX is a biologically based requirement. And of course, the last administration had changed that, had turned it on its head, which really has led us down this path where you have policies that are allowing for this kind of unfair, unjust competition.
Yeah, and Eagle Forum has worked closely with partners like CWA in helping get the word out about this, working with the Department of Ed. So it'll be interesting to see where this is headed in the next couple of years. But to add to this, the House Democrats last year passed the Equality Act. We had a lot of concerns with this piece of legislation, one of them being that it would possibly allow biological men to play on women's sports. This bill hasn't gone any farther. It hasn't hit in the Senate. But this summer, the Supreme Court made a huge ruling in the decision in Bostock versus Clayton County, which included sexual orientation and gender identity in Title VII of the Civil Rights Code. So if Democrats were able to gain control of the Senate and the White House and then pass the Equality Act, how would this affect women in sports in combination with the decision in the Supreme Court? There's a lot of different factors.
Yes, well, you know, I have to say that because the Equality Act seeks to redefine sex to include sexual orientation and gender identity, it basically removes a protected category of sex being binary, male and female, because anytime it gives preference, in a sense, by protecting someone who just can state what they believe they are, and it's not based on the factual truth of who they are in their body. it really, you can't argue with that, right? So anybody that has a desire, any male that wants to claim identity as a female, wants to claim status as a female, therefore you can't challenge that legally because they have the right to have that belief about themselves, and it's not based on anything that's factual. The rule of law gets really tough here when you don't have an ability to base something on fact of somebody's real being. So what we're concerned about at Concerned Women for America is even beyond the category of sports. It's about having protections and the physical safety protections that women need. And we've always enjoyed by having separate spaces, having protected places, having domestic violence shelters that could be female only. Those are actually challenged even today through our federal laws and state laws. And so we're concerned that if the Equality Act were to move forward, if the Congress would pass a law like the Equality Act that would say that sex now means gender identity, it would remove the protected class of sex. Just like if the ERA ever got into constitutional law that, again, doesn't have protections for women, it just basically neutralizes the meaning of sex. And again, whether or not sex has gender identity in it, or you remove an ability to protect women on the basis of sex, I think we lose, and it's a great danger for our future and for our country. So we're concerned about that. The court case, the Bostock versus Clayton County that gave transgender status a category in Title VII. Again, the threat is to move that into the category of Title IX. That basically is the thing that rules educational settings. So classrooms and bathrooms and locker rooms and sports in an interscholastic way, but in a broader concern about our society where all facilities would also be opened up under the Equality Act. Those are the things that we're concerned about. Right now, Bostock is supposed to be narrowly decided, but we know and we've seen what happened in past cases with Obergefell and others, that it quickly gets opened up and threatened in a much broader case. The Department of Education has made a specific declaration that the Bostock case does not overrule Title IX, and we are grateful for that. We work very hard to get that clarity. It's clarity that's not known and understood by schools today, and frankly, if they don't do something to enforce that, you're going to have still a great patchwork that also exists today across the states. And it's the reason that states like Idaho are passing their own laws to protect women and girls in sports, and other states are looking to follow along with them.
Yeah, to actually view that letter and the one that the coalition actually sent to the Department of Ed, we will include a link into the episode notes so you all can read it.
And please share it. This is the thing that our local school boards, our state legislatures, our state school boards, the district administrators, they all need to understand what their rules are behind Title IX, because if you're a recipient of federal funding, you need to follow the law. And the regulation authority that the Department of Education has, which is supposed to be, courts are supposed to give deference to that. So this ought to be the definitive statement and the definitive rule. And that's why we would hope that this would then deter some of the possibilities that schools are going to, again, open their competitions in an unfair way.
Yeah, this is a classic example of why words matter, because they can be interpreted different ways. So let's talk about a couple pieces of legislation that have either been passed or proposed to stop this from happening. On the federal level, Senator Kelly Loeffler from Georgia introduced the Protection of Women and Girls in Sports Act. It is meant to defend the goals of Title IX, which is considered a federal civil rights law, like you said. Can you talk a little more about what Title IX actually does, and then how the bill would clarify this language?
Sure. Yeah, so Title IX was the law passed in 1972 as the Education Amendments of 1972 to ensure that equal benefits and opportunities in education would not be discriminated on the basis of sex. So sex it basically prohibited discrimination based on the category of being male or female in education, in all categories of education. So any program or activity, it is the requirement that any school would have to follow for receiving federal education dollars. Now, at the college level, that's virtually every school in America, because they all receive student loans, federal support through students, not to mention research grants or other kinds of grants in their schools. That's all, maybe the exception of two. I think Grove City and Hillsdale have held themselves out.
Go Chargers.
Okay, there you go. But so it's not only public schools, but also many private colleges and universities. At the K through 12 level, again, most public schools are recipients of federal dollars, either through their Title I program, through education IDEA, the Individuals with Disabilities Education Act, any number of other things. So this is the avenue that the Department of Education has to ensure and enforce any kinds of discrimination complaints or concerns around Title IX. So what Kelly Loeffler's bill does is make very clear that any school receiving federal funding under Title IX must ensure that sports that are designated for women and girls are only for female athletes. It's crazy that we're having to be so explicit. We have to talk about biological sex. Well, we should think that in the scientific realm, sex has always been mentioned as a biological category. But she actually took another step in her bill, because there's a mirror bill in the House that was first offered by Greg Steube several months ago, earlier this year. Because of the nature of this debate and how things are developing, she went an extra step and put in another section that defined what was meant by sex. It meant your reproductive biology and your genetic chromosomes. Okay, that's how specific we're going to have to get to realize that we're really talking about women being female. Because today, in a sort of a trans or gender identity world where people are coming up with all ways of defining or trying to say who they are or want to claim who they are, males who are identifying as women will call themselves female. They will say they're female. And so again, we have to be so clear now, and we're grateful that she's offered this legislation. She was joined by Senator Lee, Senator Langford, Senator Cotton, and Senator Blackburn. We're hoping that we can push more senators to co-sponsor this bill. Again, we need to bring this to a national stage, and we're grateful for that, as she's done that in the Senate.
Also, Eagle Forum has sent out a legislative action alert on this bill asking your senator to co-sponsor. So please follow the link in our bio notes to do so. It is vitally important that they hear from you so that they know that this is an issue that is important and they need to take seriously. So to continue in this discussion, on the state level, Idaho recently passed the Idaho's Fairness in Sports Act. Can you talk about this bill and how other states can get on board with the same idea?
Yeah, sure. And again, this was an instance where, several states in this past legislative session, one that was very disrupted by COVID. So we didn't see as much activity in this area as we thought we might. But there were 14 to 16 states who had offered legislation similar to what Idaho's doing. Idaho got it across the finish line. The governor signed the bill, and of course it was immediately challenged and has been a lawsuit put forward by the ACLU. We expected that, and so it's now in litigation. The important thing to recognize is that Idaho made a very explicit statement of value that female sports for women and girls in the interscholastic, club level, every level that's being involved in Idaho, that those sports are designed according to your biological sex. So again, here we have an issue because girls are the ones that get disadvantaged because of our physical capacity if we have to compete against boys. It doesn't go both ways here. Girls have in the past and even still do. Some of them are kickers on football teams. Some of them are doing different things, participating in boys sports. But if you are up against competition that is anything outside of weight class, like wrestling or something, generally speaking, we're at a disadvantage. So they specifically had this bill not be one that was, defining sex as sports according to sex, but specifically trying to protect women and girls for the purposes of fair competition. It's been, I have to say that the sponsor of this legislation, Barbara Earhart, she herself was a college athlete, basketball athlete, and coached for over a decade in Division I sports. She's now a representative of the state of Idaho. She understands firsthand the importance of this issue and has been super articulate and really been in her own right, without looking for it, gotten a lot of attention and had a lot of news media opportunities. But she really says clearly how important it is that this is the future for girls. Learn so many different skills. She's seen it as a player, felt it as a player, seen it as a coach. In life, the opportunity to excel at something, to be a part of something, whether it be a team, whether to develop leadership skills. What breaks my heart is the letter that we got. This was last year when the Equality Act was being debated, from a mother in Georgia that said, my daughter is facing a situation right now in her own school about unfair competition because of gender identity. She said, my daughter said, if this is the way it's going to be, Mom, what's the point? So we're already dashing the dreams of our daughters today by setting them up in a world that says that your fairness in you for your sport, based on who you are, just the person that you are, the sex that you were born with, now doesn't matter for us in our culture, because we are going to just allow you to be trampled in an unfair situation. Again, our concern needs to be around the institutional things that are allowing this to happen, the policies that are out there right now. Not standing up for federal law, of civil rights law, but we have got to have the voice to challenge this, and to challenge it very clearly and loudly for our daughters and for the future generations, because this is not the way it's supposed to be, and this is not. And so Idaho, thank the Lord, moved in the direction that they did. They are on the front lines, or what you call ground zero, in this debate right now, and the legal challenges. And unfortunately, the NCAA is fostering and fueling this unfairness. They have, like I said, a national title, other conferences, their own policy. We're trying to do things to get that changed. That's going to come with more states going along and trying to push this issue. We already know of several that are going to be in the next session. If you're involved in your legislatures, please get behind the efforts of members and that are trying to move this forward. Be wise and winsome about the way you engage in this debate. Thankfully, in Idaho, you have two athletes that were specifically affected by the competition in the Big Sky Conference from the University of Montana, that are part of the lawsuit in defending the state of Idaho around this. This is the kind of thing we need. We need the women athletes to stand up, and we've had over 300 of them sign a letter to the NCAA, current and former NCAA athletes and professional athletes, because they're the victims. Our daughters are the victims here, our athletes. And I say, my own children were involved in sports, and one at the college level. So it's so important right now that we really be willing to get behind these state efforts.
Yeah, absolutely. And both Eagle Forum and CWA have state chapters. Mm-hmm. And there are even family policy networks in various states. So there are conservative organizations on the state level working on this legislation as well. Mm-hmm. So if you're listening, don't hesitate to find your chapter in your state. And we can help with that too if you are having trouble with finding that. But beyond state and federal, you wrote an article called How Trump Can Save Women's Sports. Mm-hmm. So in a political situation like this, where we have a Democrat majority House and a Republican majority Senate, very few bills are going to pass through both chambers to get to the president's desk. So what can the president do himself to ensure that women and girls are protected in these sports?
Thank you. And again, and this kind of goes full circle back to some of the actions that have just recently happened within the Department of Education and the Department of Justice. They both have a role to play here. The Department of Justice, we've asked to be very clear in getting involved in some of these court cases. They actually did give a statement of interest, both in Connecticut in the federal district court challenge and in the state of Idaho. They've provided legal analysis as to why first of all, the Connecticut policy is against the law, and the Idaho policy is consistent with law and constitution. And so, again, depending on which side these things are going and where the challenge is, but that's something the Department of Justice really needs to be a part of. They're responsible for enforcing our civil rights laws in the United States. Department of Education has the primary responsibility as a regulatory body to make sure that the regulations are clear that the communication to school districts are clear. We would like them to be much more aggressive, or I should say initiative oriented, in letting schools know. I think that we are going to have to be part of the mouthpiece here as organizations, which is why being involved in making clear of the policy of the department with the letters that you've shared is so important. But since I wrote that article in late last year, a lot has happened in this year, and we're grateful for that. But there's more to be done. And I would have to say that this has been an issue that's been difficult, I think, for maybe the president and others in his administration to kind of wrap around and understand. We would like to see more clarity in their position and their standing up for girls. We believe that this is the women's rights issue of our time right now. We're working closely with women across the spectrum. We find that we have a partnership with self-proclaimed radical feminists who are really recognizing, I mean, we're all standing for the female status, right? For the ability to be recognized and dignified as women, as female, and the importance behind that. And so I think that these alliances are actually speaking, they're saying something very different and new, maybe right now in a very otherwise polarized culture. So we need to embrace that. And again, I would really love to see this administration be a little more vocal out front into what their policy positions now have sort of caught up to become really the thing that we're standing on and a foundation for us to move forward.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, there's certainly been a lot that we can jump off of, which has been great for this, this past couple of years. And you're so right in talking about this tends to be a partisan issue, but it isn't one. And so as long as we continue to have all these organizations who are on differing sides of, different women issues, but we all can come together about this, our voices will be a lot louder. Yeah. It's just cool to see that come all together. Mm-hmm. So if a parent is seeing this happening in their child's school, what should they do to seek help?
And maybe I want to clarify what they're seeing happen, because there's different things that are happening right now. Mm-hmm. There's a curriculum issue right now that's going on that is, I think, of major concern. And I would recommend to everyone the book by Abigail Schreier, which maybe you've talked about before, but it's, it's about just the destruction that's happening, or the concern that's happening. Irreversible damage is what the title of the book is, and how the culture is really undermining young girls and women and our understanding of who we are. She talks a lot about the curriculum concerns in the name of anti-bullying curriculum and so forth, but it's confusing children today in our schools. I do think we have to be very clear and that to our school boards, to our teachers and so forth, that this kind of curriculum does not happen outside of the watch of parents and awareness. We need to be really clear about that schools don't have the right to identify a child that is identifying him or herself as the opposite sex without having any contact with the parent. This is happening in some of our schools across the country. The issues of the rights of parents, I think we have to own, and we have to, and to make sure that we make it very clear all the way through every administrative level of our schools that this is necessary, that we have engagement and that we have knowledge of what's happening. I'm concerned too around the policies that allow for any, going into using facilities like restrooms and locker rooms based on gender identity. I think the Title IX letter that the Department of Education has put forward makes reference to the importance of having sex-separated facilities, and we need to stand on that as the policy of the United States. And the policy under Title IX of that any school that's trying to open up their bathrooms, any state policies, any local policies, or school district policies that are otherwise, are now at risk of being found in violation. We're the ones that have to bring that voice and to make that clear to the schools. Certainly if it's happening on your sports teams, again, a lot of the schools are doing what their sports authorities in the states are telling them to do. So it's in a very difficult position to just say that they can do something different. But we need to make sure that we make really clear about the unfairness and the inequity that's happening here. And unfortunately, groups like the Women's Sports Foundation is encouraging that if a child has gender identity issues, that if they're a boy, that you start to give them treatment super early, so they won't have the disadvantage of not participating or being able to participate. Now, it doesn't go the other way, right? It's just trying to transition our little boys into girls so that they can now participate in sports in a way that would appear equitable. That is, a whole nother set of questions, and maybe a discussion for another day about the medical harm that's being done to children, that's irreversible, and the damage that is happening to them.
Mm-hmm. And for our listeners who understand that this is a hard topic to talk about, but you feel passionately about it, you're not alone. There are a lot of women who feel the same way, and a lot of parents who feel the same way. And so there are so many ways now that you can make your voice heard, whether it's online or writing an op-ed for a local paper or joining a group of women who are like-minded in your area. There are a lot of ways that you can feel that camaraderie and then start your own little grassroots movement in your town. And so it's important that you understand that you can make your voice heard. And it's not easy, but you're not going to be alone in your efforts.
Well, and this is the perfect example of someone. I'll just mention a podcast that we just put up this last month, Maria Keffler, speaking with Penny Nance. She is the example of just what you said. She was a teacher in the schools that then, has now young teenage children. She wrote about the situation in Arlington County Public Schools where you had a trans activist group come into the kindergarten and teach kids about having to decide who they were and their gender. And no parents knew about this. She wrote an article, it ended up in the Washington Post. She got a parent network group started. They've taken the policy, challenged the policy, got tons of interaction and engagement. And she herself has been a situation in her own life as a mother facing a daughter with challenges here, likely just because of the culture we live in that introduces ideas that they wouldn't otherwise have about themselves. And she, so she's a member of our church. It's just exactly what you said. When someone finds themselves in a position, don't deny the fact that the Lord might have you in that place for such a time as this. And that's really the thing that we have to embrace or want to embrace as women, and as believers and as people that can stand up for truth in our culture.
And if you really wanted to get some more information on specifically just the transgender movement, go and listen to our episode that we did a couple weeks ago with Erin Brewer. She's a friend of Maria, and she has a very powerful story about what's going on in our culture from a very personal spot in her life.
This has absolutely been an informative discussion, and there's so much to flesh out of this. We will be sharing information all week about, articles, things that CWA has done, and just a lot of good information where you can dive in deep and take some time to just mull over what we're talking about. But where can our listeners go right now and follow CWA's effort and get more information on this topic?
Thank you. Thanks for that. Concernedwomen.org, under our current topics tab, we have a Standing with Female Athletes kind of landing page with a lot of information, links to some other action that's going on, certainly some fact sheets and some other things to find. We're trying to keep and compile the latest things there on our site. We're partnering closely, and I know that you know well, SaveWomenSports.com. SaveWomenSports.com is their landing page. But this is an organization that was founded by a powerlifter, USA powerlifter. She found herself in a very unfortunate reality situation of having to face the competition and be berated during competition by activists that were trying to make a point. She's from Minnesota. She has now galvanized women across this country and across the world. There's partnerships going on right now at the international level because we're trying to appeal to the International Olympic Committee. And so SaveWomenSports.com is another great place for resources and information.
Well, thank you so much, Doreen, again for joining us today. It's been such a great discussion. For those of you listening to this episode, please be sure to subscribe, share with your friends, and even leave us a review. You can find us on all the major social media platforms and at engagewitheagleforum.com. From your house to the State House to the White House, this is Engage with Eagle Forum.